All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what I decided earlier today is going to be my final podcast of the year because I'm not going to lie, your boy's drained. I look pretty rough. I'm not happy with how good my guest came looking today because that's just making me feel insecure, but it's fine. We're here. We're moving.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I didn't put any work into it. So
yeah, that's worse. That means you just got it naturally. Jim Cressman of Invictus. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Good to be on.
No, thanks for coming on and dealing with all the rescheduling and stuff like that. It's been a wild week, but I'm glad it got you here. And what a day yesterday to have you and have you come after what was just announced yesterday. We were talking about it briefly before we started here. The capacity limits for 1,000 plus capacity venues are getting slashed in half. And obviously being in the position you are, that's gonna fuck with a lot of what you got going on. So kind of talk me through how it's affecting exactly what's happening right now.
Yeah. So right now, most urgently, it's affecting the on sales for ZZ Top date that I have at the community theater in Thunder Bay. I have the London, Ontario show with ZZ Top. We're already at almost 3,000 tickets sold there. It's doing really well. It's going to sell out. We're not suspending sales on that, but the venue in Thunder Bay wants to suspend sales, even though the show's in May. So my perspective is, let's put it on sale. Let's let the consumer decide if they want to take the risk, because we're not forcing anybody to buy a ticket. You don't want to buy a ticket because you're worried about Omicron or anything else. You don't have to buy it. But if we still have restrictions in May, well, then we can deal with them then. But, just working around bureaucrats who typically come from a non-entrepreneurial background, and they're not risk takers for the most part, right? So they speak a different language, and you have to be patient and try to understand their concerns so that you can address them and hopefully move forward in a win-win manner for everybody. But for me, it's not just about me as a promoter. It's about the band. I want to make sure that when I put these bands in these venues, that these shows go well and that we've maximized the audience size, right? And of course, that's been a major problem for the last almost 2 years.
Yeah, it's the industry first to go and last to come back, and it's amazing to keep seeing these drawbacks happen. Like, they're adjusting based on what they feel is best, which I completely agree with you on that. We're dealing with a complicated time, confusing time. Like my job, the venue I work for, that we just had to announce cancellations and postpones of a couple of our own shows just because the venue doesn't want to take a liability risk on it. And it's crazy to see that this is kind of where we're all going, and like the bunch of red flags pointing to another potential lockdown in Ontario in January, but we just don't really know. And it is frustrating to say the least, especially from your position. And it always makes me laugh thinking about Thunder Bay saying that to you, because like Thunder Bay is that one area that's like really in the middle of nowhere, right up in the north. And it's like, how many people are actually there?
Yeah. And listen, I'm all about keeping people safe. The last thing I want is to throw a concert, have an accidental super spreader event, or God forbid somebody dies. But the most used phrase in the last year and a half has been follow the science. So if we're going to follow the science, then we have to pay attention to the data. And as you and I speak today on this podcast, so far, unless anything's changed in the last few hours, one person has died worldwide with Omicron, with that variant. And that was in Britain, not from it necessarily, but with it, which means they could have died of something else and just tested positive for it. So at some point, and again, I think we have to remember that everybody's an individual, everybody's comfortable with different levels of risk. We have to at some point relinquish that back to the public to go, if you want to be in a crowded space with other people and you're double vaccinated and you're wearing a mask, is that good enough for you? And if not, you don't have to participate. But if you want to, if live music is a mental health pillar for you, if congregating is a mental health pillar for you, then you should get the opportunity to calculate the risk on it as an individual and decide whether you want to be in that audience or not. And, I'm far from a libertarian, but I'm more of like hey, at some point you got to let people decide. Like, we don't ban fast food consumption. We don't ban cigarette smoking. We don't ban skydiving. All of these things have their own associated dangers. And at some point, COVID will just be another factor in associated dangers that we have to live with if we're going to exist on this planet. And so we have to decide how we're going to handle that as a society. Are we going to lock down every time somebody has a fucking runny nose? Because that doesn't seem like a good long-term strategy, you know?
No, and I have to agree. The biggest thing that I've understood from watching everybody's reaction, both in our industry, politically, everywhere, it's literally just chaos and day by day. That's all. That's literally all we can do at the moment, because no one has the answer, because they're still trying to find the answer. They're still trying to work it out, and it's I just don't know where this is going to go in the next year and a bit, because we had a small little, like, essentially a taste of like a fall season, kind of like a half a fall season for some shows and maybe a few festivals in the summer. And we got that taste back. We got to see some venues fill up, and now we're about to revert back to that point. But moving on from that, I kind of wanted to talk to you about Invictus and just this whole massive operation that you have going on with all the different facets of it, and how it got started and the trajectory of then and now.
Right. So I worked for an independent small booking agency in Calgary called Key Entertainment Group at one point. I was working there as I was pursuing a career in broadcasting and managing a horse boarding stable, and had a couple other jobs just because this is a commission driven business. So until you build up a clientele and a reputation, you just don't make any money. So it took me about 7 years to get to a point where I could dedicate myself to this full time and still pay my bills. Um, and from there, it's actually grown quite substantially. So I started out as an agent because I enjoy conversing with people. I enjoy talking about artists that I'm passionate about and their accomplishments. And that is just literally how you translate that into sales. So I always knew that some of the most secure people in the equation when it comes to an artist career are the people who generate the revenue, the people who make the artist money, right? At the end of the day, if you're doing this for a living and you're not doing this for a hobby, you need people around you who are going to be able to assist you in monetizing your career. And then I grew out that skill set to artist management because I developed enough trust with my clients by being a good agent that more of them said, hey, listen, why don't you just take other facets of my career over, because your track record on being right is not 100%, but it's better than anybody else I've dealt with to this point. And then eventually I got into promoting as well, which meant buying concert tours, and doing deals with venues to bring in artists of arena level or stadium level magnitude. And then in those particular cases, my original impetus and motivation to do that was to get my own artists on the front end of those tours. So I'd buy an Alan Jackson tour so I could put George Canyon on the front of it. I'd buy a ZZ Top tour so I could put Corey Marks on the front of it, right? So those models really complemented each other well. But promoting is very high risk. You got to really know what you're doing. You have to mitigate as much risk as possible by partnering with venues or having them take some of the risk with you if they're in the position to do so. And then we developed a label component to this company too, because again, I felt like some of the options available to some of the management clients I had, I would get these deal proposals from labels and I would go like, this is a deal with the devil. Like, we have to sign away your rights to almost everything and give them a percentage of live and merch. And I just went, let's just scrap that model. And what if I built a label in-house? Because I'm already getting a percentage of those things as your manager. And now what I'll do is I'll add this as a service so we can distribute your music, promote your music, which will drive demand back to me as your agent manager so that we can continue to have a career for you, for festivals, fairs, casinos, clubs, whatever it is at that artist level in their career.
And that's truly amazing that you've took all these facets of the industry and combined them and found the way that they layer on top of each other beautifully. I want to talk about the different facets, but the first thing that comes to mind is, what do you think is the biggest difference in the relationship between an artist manager and the artist, and the agent and the artist? Because I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast may not know the exact difference between those two relationships,
Right.
but also which one of those relationships can be more complex to deal with?
Typically the manager. So a manager is going to negotiate recording deals, your merch deals with the merchandising companies, endorsement, sponsorship deals. The manager is usually the go-between between the agent and the artist as well. So the agent typically will generate a performance opportunity, take it to the manager to consider. If the manager knows what they're doing, they will either vet that opportunity, or they trust the agent enough to know that the agent has already done the pre-screening and vetting of that show, and then they'll circle back to the client. So the more intimate relationship is between the client and the manager, and an agent is within that circle, but more daily dealing with the manager than dealing with the client directly. Although a lot of clients do like to talk to their agents as well. And like I said, that's how I developed my business over time. They would call me directly and I would always take their calls. And it was never an objective of mine to supersede the chain of command. But I also found that some managers, if they were managing multiple clients, they just weren't getting back to this particular client. And if they wanted a direct line of communication with me, ultimately I work directly for the client. I don't work for the manager in the role of an agent.
And that's where I usually see a lot of complications lie in this industry, especially with the early developing artists, because what I've seen sometimes is if an agent gets on board first, they kind of adopt the role of a manager until they find that manager. But then the complication comes when you find the right manager, but then that agent doesn't want to step down. And that's kind of the dance on the line that I always see, especially with that early talent. So now, kind of focusing more on the promotion aspect of it, what kind of relationships do you have to develop in order for a venue to take a risk on an arena size band in their club? Because a lot of these venues, and you know quite as well as I, is many of them don't have the infrastructure to take the risk. But even when they do, it takes a good arm and a leg twist to get them to really see the potential there.
Well, it depends on how hungry they are for content. You know, we've done economic impact studies that have proven that most of the arena shows that we bring to communities generate anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million per show in ancillary revenue for the community and economic impact overall. So hotels, gas stations, restaurants, barbershops, like literally everything gets flooded. Like I remember the first time or the only time I brought Motley Crue to Estevan, Saskatchewan. And it was a Tuesday night. And I flew into Regina. I drove out to Estevan and the town was buzzing. You know, it took forever to get checked into the hotel. I could barely find a place to eat because so many people had just flooded that town on a Tuesday. So a lot of venues are working either in lockstep with their community partners or they are owned by the city themselves. And so the city oftentimes will recognize how valuable these shows are, not only to the art scene in these communities, which is imperative, but also and quality of the life, but also the economic impact, the direct economic impact that they receive from these shows. So I usually, when I'm trying to negotiate a deal with a venue, I always try to assume their position and see it from their perspective. And I think that's a key in any negotiation. If you can empathize enough with the person you are attempting to make a sale to a point where you can address their concerns in the language they would use, then suddenly they're going to look at you and go, you know what? You get it. You get what our concerns are. You also get what our objectives are. And that's somebody that we want to be in business with. And listen, I'm putting up my money too. as a private promoter, right? So I'm not Live Nation. I don't have billions of dollars in public money at my disposal. This is my money. So if I'm willing to put up, 150, $200,000 to bring in a band, it's because I believe in it as well. And I'm not looking to throw away money or lose it. So if I bring the community in, or the event center or the arena in as a partner, it's because I believe enough in the show and I've done my research to make sure that I'm positive it's going to work. It doesn't always work, but our rate of success runs anywhere between, this is pre-pandemic, obviously, but 87% on the low end in the last decade to 93% on the high end of the level of shows that we bring in that are profitable.
I just want the listeners to take a moment and just pause that. Like, that percentage is absolutely absurd in conjunction to most of the industry, unless
Well, if
you
I
are
told
those
you
higher level
I'm going to
businesses.
take you to the casino,
Okay.
and we're going to win 87 to 93% of the time, you're going to want to go to the casino with me, right? So again, I love enthusiastically and passionately selling products, but really I am backstopped by data. It's like data cut through all the bullshit in this business. And there is so much bullshit and so much hyperbole. So if you get someone who goes, listen, this is the research we've done on this band, this is how many spins they get in your market on these radio stations, we can pull geo-targeted back end, in some cases Spotify streams to know, we can pull albums, we can pull all this data together now. It's at our fingertips, and go, this is why we think this will work. And listen, we could be wrong, but we've been right 93% of the time. So if that's a risk you want to take it with us.
Yeah, well, I commend you on that, man. That's I I didn't expect the percentage to be that high. I'm just kind of in shock by that, because when I think of success rates in this industry, that's double to possibly triple the case for some certain shows and some certain events. So that's great. In terms, the last thing I want to talk about Invictus is you've built this empire. You've developed all these different facets of it. You've developed a great reputation in the industry. I've talked to a lot of people before I talked to you, just to get an idea of who you are, and it's a lot of positive things. Straightforward guy, knows the grind store, gets shit done. Love it. What's next for Invictus? Like, have you already started projecting 2, 5, 10 years ahead, or are you just kind of like enjoying the moment / just trying to get through the pandemic?
It's a little of both. I mean, that's a good question. I want to continue to focus. I'm working on opening an office in Nashville. I just feel like I need more of a presence down there, out of sight, out of mind. Even though I built a reputation for 20 years, you still need to be in those meetings, in that ecosystem. So I'll be spending more time down there. I want to develop out. I actually want to tighten up my roster even more so, and develop out more focus for those artists, specifically of everything from recording plans to endorsement deals to I'm working on a fragrance line for one of my clients right now. Like, those types of things have been, the value of the pandemic is that it forced us all to become really resourceful. So there's a bunch of deals pending that I can't necessarily disclose, but a television development deal for a brand new children's show for one of my clients that we were able to focus on, really dedicate time to, and build out. And I think we're going to get a network partner on board. It looks very favorable. They've already greenlit us to a point where I feel like this is going to get picked up. We've done more sponsorship and social media sponsorship deals than ever before. Specifically for Brett Kissel, but also for Jess Moskaluk and Corey Marks and some of our other clients. And I just really want to focus on taking artists and maximizing them, as opposed to spreading myself too thin, which is where I think I separate myself from a lot of my competitors in this business.
No, and I have to agree with you on that. There's definitely a separation between what you're doing with Invictus and what a lot of companies are following, because you're just from this conversation, it's very much you see something and you're like, well, it doesn't make sense because ABC, so I'm going to fix it and do it myself. And that is my favorite attitude, that entrepreneurial spirit that I love when I see that in people, because it's a hunger. It's a thirst to push and develop and grow and see where something can go. And I'm the exact same way. So I get exactly where you're coming from. Last thing I kind of want to talk to you about is your podcast, because we're on a podcast, you have a podcast, we got to promote it right near the end here. Talk to me about the Jim Cressman show. Well, how'd that get started and what are you
Sure.
doing with it?
Well, just before I jump to that, I wanted to say something. There's this great line that I want to pass along to people that I actually heard from Tony Robbins years ago. Um, and he said, for most entrepreneurs, they're focused on thinking their problem is a lack of resources, but often it's a lack of resourcefulness. You have everything you need. You just haven't figured out how to put the pieces together to do what needs to get done, or take the action on it, or boldly step out of the herd and try something a bit different. So, I do want to encourage people to really think about that statement, because it's been something that I've come back to time after time when I've made these decisions about how to expand our company and where to go and what to do. And that leads into the podcast, which, I mean, I just feel very fortunate to be in this business. And I know there's a lot of parents out there who are managing their children who have shown a real interest in developing a career in the arts. And I know there's lots of artists out there who haven't built their business to the level where they can attract or procure a manager or an agent or a publicist, even. And a lot of these people reach out to me on social media. So I thought, what if during the pandemic, when I have some spare time, I just put this podcast together and I brought on a wealth of contacts that I've developed over the years and asked them questions from the perspective of my own knowledge and experience in this business, but also from the perspective of an artist who might want to understand what it takes to get the attention of an A-level manager, of an A-level major label. Like, what do you need to do? What metrics do you need to have in place? And so that's just been my way of you know intellectual philanthropy, just giving back to that community of artists that are out there, that are struggling, that are trying to figure out what to do and what next steps to take, and having these long, in-depth conversations with people where we touch on a variety of subjects, but hopefully you're walking away from the over what there's at least over 120 hours now of content there. Hopefully, if you've had a chance to consume some of it, you're walking away with more knowledge than you had before. And I've gotten hundreds of DMs, positive comments from artists going, I love your podcast. Thanks for having so and so on. You asked them some great questions, and now I know what to do. That's why I did it. That was my why. And that feels so good. But with business getting back to normal, I will be winding the podcast down. So I'm making an announcement shortly that I'm going to cap it off probably at 80 episodes. And then I'm going to just conduct random interviews when I'm on the road. So if I'm on the road with Kit Warren, we're doing a tour, we'll sit down and chat for an hour. And I'll post that on the YouTube channel, and people can go listen to, his philosophies and how he structured his career. And that's how I want to do it moving forward, so that I can make sure that I'm not dropping the ball on all of the obligations I have for my clients, because that's imperative.
No, I feel the same way. This podcast started the exact same kind of thing. Like 2 weeks into lockdown, I was losing my mind. I need something to do, so that's when all this got started, and it's now starting to wind down because, like you said, things are starting to get back and rolling, and we just got to get back to some sense of normalcy. But Jim, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me here. This was a great conversation. I know people definitely are going to take away something from many of the great things you said. Where can people find you and what you do?
So you can search Invictus Entertainment Group. And you can even just Google Jim Cressman. My social media handles are mostly at Jim Cressman, Twitter, Facebook. I have a Facebook page for the podcast specifically, and an Instagram page for the podcast, as well as an Instagram page personally, where you can follow my journey on everything family, fitness, and music.
All of Jim's info is going to be in the description down below if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're checking this out on any other platform. This is the last one for the year. So thank you guys for watching. I don't know when the next one's going to be, but I'll see you in 22. 2022. Take it easy. Peace.